So time to get started. Councilman, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you, Eve, and of course, thanks to all of our friends at the Department of Transportation for all of their great partnership and availing themselves this evening and even preceding this evening's event. But good evening, everyone. I'm Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez, and I really appreciate everyone participating in this evening's Zoom. Obviously it's become the new normal, but a Zoom to discuss what would ordinarily be discussed in person. And that is to discuss some of the amendments that we want to talk about with respect to our transportation initiatives associated with Vision Zero, so that we can help improve the safety conditions along the Foothill corridor in Lakeview Terrace. Late in October of 2019, we tragically had two equestrians that were riding along Foothill Boulevard, and they were near the city's equestrian trails in the Lakeview Terrace area. Sadly, as they were headed back to their stable, they were struck by a vehicle. Tragically, the two horses were killed and the riders were severely injured. It is because of circumstances like this that we continue to be working on initiatives here in the Northeast Valley to help create safer conditions where members of our community can safely utilize some of the passages that we have that are available for pedestrians, equestrians, cyclists, and motorists. And so we have been working very collaboratively with members of our community, the Neighborhood Council, and of course, our incredible Department of Transportation, to help create some of the infrastructure investments that will create the conditions that will help slow traffic, provide greater safety and safety enhancements, and basically enable us to create the conditions that we want that don't just require endless amounts of enforcement. We need to create the conditions on our streets that will engender the kinds of speeds and safety precautions that we want to see in our communities. Last year, in the wake of the accident, we worked very closely with the Bureau of Street Lighting to upgrade all the existing lights along the corridor to provide a higher density LED lighting along that area. We've been working with the Department of Water and Power to upgrade 18 Cobra head light fixtures on DWP poles along this corridor as well. So we're going to continue to be advancing a variety of improvements, but it really involves the community to help get the kinds of, addressing all the nuances and making sure that everyone understands what we're proposing. Because oftentimes, there might be misstatements made about what we're intending to do. And what we're intending to do is make sure that the outcomes associated with the investments that we're trying to bring into this area are going to create safer streets for all of our community members to enjoy. And that's really the purpose of tonight's event and meeting. And we want to make sure that we continue to shepherd in greater investments. And I know, as Tim knows, we're in the middle of the budget process right now. We stand in our area to potentially get even more investments in infrastructure that will help address some of the long-standing safety concerns that we've all experienced, and I know members of the community have been concerned about long preceding my being in elected office. But I'm happy to say that with the collaboration and the work of Vision Zero and the partnership, and Eve doing an outstanding job here in my district, I know she and Tim are inseparable, working on a number of projects, but it's with great pleasure that I'd like to take this opportunity to now turn it over to our incredible folks at the Department of Transportation to walk you through some of the improvements that we'd like the community to engage in with respect to Foothill Boulevard. So Tim, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thank you, Council Member. I think Claire actually is going to start the presentation. I'll take over at some point in the middle.
Perfect.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. Is my sound okay? Great. Thank you so much, Council Member Rodriguez, for that introduction. And thank you for everyone who's here online with us and on the phone. We'd like to introduce our team of presenters to get started. My name is Claire Eberly. I'm a transportation planner with the City of Los Angeles Department of Transportation. And I'm here with my colleague, Babak Dorji, who's also a transportation planner with the Department of Transportation. He will be managing your questions and maybe responding to some of them directly in the Q&A. Also with LADOT is Tim Fremeau, Senior Transportation Engineer overseeing the Valley District Office for LADOT. We also have Eve Sinclair, the Area Director with the Office of Councilmember Rodriguez's office. And I know that there are some additional staff members with Council District 7 here with us tonight. If you're here with us, you might have spoken with members of Team Emerald and the community. And I want to thank the council member in CD7 for your partnership in leading the safety effort with LADOT. A couple notes on using Zoom. So at the bottom of the screen, make sure that you select a language channel for interpretation. And we're taking questions in the chat box on Zoom. So we are only using chat for questions. However, if you're on the phone, you can email us at ladot.active@lacity.org. That's ladot.active@lacity.org. And we'll try and answer your question live or get back to you by email if we're not able to get to it tonight. So here is our agenda and what we are going to be covering in this evening's meeting. We're talking about the Foothill Boulevard Safety Project. We'll show the project location, the project goals, the history and background, the community feedback received so far, as well as the new street design, highlight some important key safety features that will be implemented as part of this project in specific locations, and we'll take some questions at the end of the presentation. And yes, we are happy to make the slides available, and I believe this meeting is also going to be recorded and shared on Facebook on behalf of Council District 7. The Foothill Boulevard Safety Project is on Foothill Boulevard between Osborne Street and Wentworth Street in Lakeview Terrace. Based on community feedback and conversations and concerns shared with LADOT and with Council District 7, the Foothill project is designed to meet these goals, to improve safety and visibility on the corridor, to encourage safer speeds and driving behavior, to maximize use of the road shoulder and create some safer space for everyone using the street, and to make the street feel more comfortable for people who live, walk, ride, roll, and get around on Foothill. So this project definitely has a background, and the council member spoke to it very well. Councilmember Rodriguez initiated the Foothill Corridor redesign and improvements with a council motion in 2019. Last year, just before the pandemic, Council District 7 hosted a community meeting at Lakeview Terrace Rec Center, and that really kicked off the conceptual design process. Since then, LADOT has been working on the design that we're going to show you tonight and the specific safety improvements. In the meantime, the city has implemented a sort of phase 1 of those improvements. Importantly, that includes street lighting upgrades, some hedge and tree trimming, and some just essential maintenance improvements to make the street safer while we work on a redesign. Tonight, we're here for the community meeting and design update to talk about the phase 2 improvements, so street repaving and improvements to a pedestrian crossing at Christie. And again, specific safety features along the corridor. And in planning for future years is a following phase that the council member initiated to install a bridle path along Foothill to really connect things and create a high-class facility, high-quality facility. So this is I'm sure most of the folks here this evening, are residents and stakeholders and very familiar. This is a really vibrant corridor in the heart of the foothills. There's a lot of recreational activity with equestrian facilities and trails, the wash, the whole Hanson Dam area, the golf course, and organizations and faith-based organizations and churches, and of course the community that lives and works here. So a lot of people using the street. At the same time, there are significant safety issues that the community has really expressed a lot of desire to have addressed, especially with all of those different users and people using the street in different ways. So community members have reported high speeds, poor visibility, and as you can see, it's a wide street with people using the street maybe in unpredictable ways. Some of these issues we can aim to solve with design and safety features, and we're really looking forward to the opportunity to do so. So a little more detail on the actual collision history. There have been a number of major collisions, severe and fatal collisions on Foothill in recent years, including recent major collisions that included horse fatalities. This map shows several of the most severe. So there is a history. There's a number of other crashes that aren't shown here. So we know that the data shows us that there's some issues. I want to take a moment to just highlight that visibility is definitely something that we have heard and is a major concern. This need has been recognized and is an ongoing effort to improve. So Council District 7 has been really proactive in making reflective horse gear available. And the street lighting, which I mentioned, has been upgraded this year. So if you are an equestrian and interested in having some reflective swag for your horse, please reach out to the Council District 7 office for more information, and they can see what is available for you. So last year in February 2020, CD7 brought the community together at Lakeview Terrace Rec Center I believe in partnership with the Foothill Trails District Neighborhood Council as well, to discuss needs and priorities for the street and for the neighborhood. People contributed ideas and feedback to several maps and gave us some really important sort of qualitative information and ideas about what needs to happen. So some great ideas were compiled. And here is a summary. Also, many people attended, which is really great. Here's a summary of what we heard. There's a need for new and improved crossings. There's a need for sidewalk or paths to improve access to local trails, more signage to improve visibility for everyone. We need marked or separated bike lanes, and we need some ways to address speeding. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tim to talk a little bit about the existing corridor conditions.
Thanks, Claire. Some of you may have met me, and if you haven't, my name is Tim Framo, and I'm a senior engineer with DOT, and I oversee 3 of our 6 district offices, including the Valley, East and West Valley, and West LA. But I will say that this part of town is one of my favorites to work in, and this is a great, exciting opportunity for me. And I know some of the folks already have mentioned in the chat that there are other streets that need attention. And this is not the end of our road show here. We're going to be moving on to some other streets in the near future. And this is just a great opportunity for a partnership between CD7 and DOT. So This street today, Foothill Boulevard in this segment is, as I'm sure you all are very familiar with, pretty high speed and, it features 4 lanes, 2 in each direction, parking on both sides intermittently, although not heavily used in all places, but there is essentially a parking lane / shoulder. This is an image here just east of Christie. And the lane widths are a little wider than I would personally like to see on a street like this. Probably that was designed many decades ago when lane width wasn't really something that was scrutinized, but now we see opportunities where if we narrow the lanes to roughly 10 feet, then we can shave off a little bit of space that we can then partition in a different way. And you'll see some of that as we proceed through this presentation. So of course, my pleasure. So if you want to flip through the next couple slides, we can just look again at some of the existing conditions. And you'll notice the tire tracks. We know there's also street racing and exhibitionist behavior, which we can address sort of separately. Requires more of a partnership with our enforcement colleagues. That's a very specific issue that we really have noticed an uptick during COVID. So we just have to acknowledge it because the pictures are clearly demonstrating that there's a lot of that activity here. Another image here. This is one of the better sections within this segment where you have the bridle path and you have an existing bike lane, but these facilities aren't continuous. So one of the objectives here is to provide more continuity in terms of bicycle lanes and as well as equestrian paths of travel. Another image, typical, and you'll also notice the pavement condition isn't great. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but there's repaving planned as part of this project in the very near future. So that's part of the overall effort that we're taking to use the opportunity of repaving to restripe, not just within the repaved surface, but beyond. And there's curvature here as well, of course. Next slide. Claire, I'll hand it back to you if you want to cover the proposed changes.
Yep, great. Thanks, Tim. So I'm going to walk through a couple locations to describe what the new street layout will look like. And, it does change quite a bit. So this is just a few locations where the configuration will change and people will see changes that we want to highlight at a kind of conceptual level. So first, between Christie and Wheatland, and this is, a segment where we've definitely heard about, both from the crash history and from feedback, we've heard there are safety and visibility issues, and this is really a focus segment for the project. There are 2 lanes in each direction, and kind of also is a good summary of everything that is going to happen to the west of Wheatland, where right now there are 2 lanes in each direction and parking on both sides of the street right now, curbside. But the sort of sidewalk is intermittent. There's no sidewalk in many cases. There is the bridle path, also kind of without consistent access. So the new project would repurpose the roadside space west of Wheatland to create a protective barrier between the travel lanes and the roadside shoulder. So as you can see here, where previously, we were showing curbside parking, street side parking, we'll be repurposing that space to create kind of a flex zone, a protected shoulder with a striped buffer and bollards. And then a little bit further to the east, going east of Wheatland, between Wheatland and Esco, there is an existing bike lane in this segment in each section, and there are 2 travel lanes in each direction. For the most part, there's no existing parking here. There's primarily a tow-away no stopping zone. And what we're proposing to do is actually to narrow the travel lanes just a little bit It will almost be sort of imperceptible, but it will seem to narrow the street and will encourage drivers to slow down a little bit and to use more consistent speeds. And then with that extra space, we're able to add a buffer and a bollard. And I see the question in the chat, why are we seeing bikes and not horses? This is a horse community, absolutely. I think there's a software program that we use that doesn't have a horse feature, and I've been thinking that actually, it's not well adapted for every community. We know that horses are definitely a priority, and equestrian safety is really important here. But there are other users as well. There are people who may use us to ride bikes in, or scooters or other slower moving devices as well. So it's a conceptual representation. And then Foothill Place to Conover, Tim touched on this. There's a gap right now in where the bikeways are. There's only a westbound bikeway, no eastbound bikeway, and the travel lane widths are quite wide. So the new project would level out and balance the street, provide that eastbound connection, and also narrow the roadway just a little bit, or narrow the lane widths just a little bit. I want to point out that there are no changes to the number of travel lanes. The number of travel lanes will not change. We're not reducing lanes for vehicles. They're just going to be just a little bit more narrow as a safety feature, and that is a design feature that can help make the street safer, as well as enable some space for that safety buffer between the sidewalk and the shoulder, and the faster moving traffic. And I also want to highlight here, there are important benefits for people who are, whose homes are here, who are living here. There's just a little bit more space between maybe their front yard, or where they are like entering their car, and where vehicle traffic is moving really fast. So here's where we will be adding key safety features, and we'll walk through each of these locations in a little more detail. So this is a map layout of the corridor overall. It's also where you can see the distinct segments in terms of what's happening in the space along the shoulder. East of Wheatland, there are existing bike lanes that will be improved and upgraded. West of Wheatland, we'll be creating that safer shoulder area for all users. And once we can improve the pavement condition, these will become designated spaces for bikes as well. And these can be used by everyone. Everyone using slower moving modes. I do want to point out, and Tim touched on this as well, that the street will be repaved east of Wheatland, and that is what enables us to implement the design features for bikeways there. And then over the coming months, potentially the next year or so, we will continue to work with our partners in Streets LA to repave the rest of the corridor and improve the pavement condition. So again, where we're adding the protected shoulder is from Osborne Street to Wheatland. We'll be adding new eastbound bicycle lane connection between Foothill Place and Foothill Place, where there isn't one right now, and upgrading protected bicycle lanes from Wheatland Ave all the way to Wentworth. And here's what that looked like on the map again. And in the segment just past Christie, between Christie and Wheatland, this is the existing condition, and here's what this will look like. So this is where the major crash happened in 2019, in which 2 horses were struck and killed, very sadly. And the major changes here at this location, there's a wider roadside shoulder, which is currently a parking lane. It will be repurposed to add a stripe buffer to separate the travel lanes. And it shows you where the travel lanes are just a little bit narrower, as I mentioned, which will encourage safer speeds and hopefully safer driving behavior. And as you can see, this kind of shows how it really opens up visibility for people using using the space along the road. They're not blocked by parked vehicles, and they're separated from fast moving vehicle traffic. And then next up here is Foothill and Osborne on the east end of the project area, where the crosswalk will be upgraded crossing Foothill. And at Foothill and Orcas, the crosswalks on Foothill will be upgraded to high visibility continental crosswalks at this really frequently used crossing location. And then again at Foothill and Wheatland, we will also be upgrading the crosswalks with high visibility continental crosswalks. And for an example of what that looks like, here's Wheatland today, which of course, is another very frequently used crossing point for people accessing trails in the Wash south of the freeway. And this is what a continental crosswalk looks like. This will improve visibility and safety of people using the intersection. LADOT is also working to improve the crossing point at Christie, which is currently a flashing beacon activated by a push button. But the beacon is by the side of the road. The light is by the side of the road. And it's going to be upgraded to a new beacon called a HAWK, or a high intensity activated crosswalk beacon. And the beacon will have flashing lights above the crosswalk. It will be highly visible, also activated by a push button.
And if I can just jump in real quick, the image is a little misleading on the right. The HAWK beacon, it's very new in Los Angeles. It's actually a flashing red display that looks almost like a railroad crossing, and vehicles are required to stop, and the users of the crosswalk will get a walk sign. So it's significantly more robust in terms of the protection and the yielding of vehicles compared to any sort of flashing yellow beacon that we used previously. So we're starting to move into doing more HAWK beacons for major street crossings like this one.
Thanks, Tim. So lastly, to recap some of the considerations in terms of what's changing and what's not changing, there will be changes to on-street parking in key locations where parking is repurposed to create a safer street. There will not be any changes to the number of travel lanes. There will not be impacts to emergency vehicle access or capacity in that way. And there is bus service here on Foothill currently through Metro Route 90. This project will not influence the location of bus stops as part of the project at this time. And then to talk a little bit more about the parking changes. So this map shows where existing parking, curbside parking will be repurposed in orange. The green shows where there's no changes to existing parking. And for the most part, this is actually existing no stopping or no stopping at any time, no parking. The project will create more consistency in the street design throughout the corridor and sort of create a consistent, predictable degree of visibility and layout of the street. Overall, the project aims to balance the needs of parking and where possible and really focus on the safety improvement and the safety benefits that can be gained there. This also, I just want to note that the map is concept level. If you have a specific question or concern about a specific location, please reach out to us. And now I will hand it over to Eve to talk about what's next in this process and when you can expect to see changes.
Hi, everyone. So basically, we are anticipating for a large section of Foothill from Esco to Foothill Place, kind of right next to Conover, to be resurfaced on the weekend of June 5th and June 6th. Following that, we will go ahead with the actual restriping of the street to enact the changes that we're talking about right now. We are going to continue to move forward with resurfacing different sections. So the next section we'll be focusing on is resurfacing Foothill between Esco and Wheatland. So that is currently scheduled right now for our next fiscal year, which will be 21 to 22. And as we go, we can actually convert the shoulder space into what's considered an official bike lane. And then I also wanted to address just some of the concerns. So this is actually working in coordination with several other departments. So as the councilwoman had referenced towards the beginning, we worked with Bureau of Street Lighting to increase the visibility. We're working with DOT to create safer space on the street. But obviously the safest space for equestrians and for horses is not to be on the street at all, but to be on a separate bridle path. So separately, we're working on creating a contiguous bridle path on the north side of the streets. And so that will be happening as well, but it will likely take a longer period of time because that is in the right of way. And so we have to kind of go on a property by property basis. But this is really designed to create and to maximize that shoulder space that can be used again by bicycles, by horses that are currently riding in the street, and also by people that do walk in the street as well. So I did want to address that briefly, and then we will continue to move forward with the resurfacing. And then those are some of the changes that are coming up. And again, the bridle path will, be something that we're doing section by section. So we are hoping to work first on the section from Osborne to Orcas, and then we'll keep moving section by section after that. So the intent is really to have separated spaces. So the equestrians will be on the bridle path area, which will have fencing and DG and all the things that were referenced. And then this is really just creating that safe space, both for cyclists, for people that might be jogging, when horses do have to leave the road for whatever reason, or the bridle path to go into the road, then they can also have a safer space right now with that protected shoulder. Okay.
And we'd love to hear from you at LADOT and at Council District 7. There is a project webpage, which I can drop the link in the chat box. And that project webpage offers a feature where you can add your own feedback to a feedback map, give us your ideas for signs, maintenance, safety, street enhancements. We also have a link to the project video on the webpage and some additional information. We'll link, I think, this video there. And in the meantime, please reach out to us at LADOT at ladot.active@lacity.org or at Council District 7's office at the council member's email, which is on the screen, councilmember.rodriguez@lacity.org, or call 818-352-3287 to provide your feedback. And with that, we are happy to take any questions. And I see there's a lot of comments and discussion in the chat box, which is really great to see.
Okay, so we have been getting a lot of questions coming in. And perhaps we can, I'll just kind of start with the first one. When is the left turn phasing signal going to go in at Osborne and Foothill? Oh, never mind. I actually have the answer to that. Estimated March 2023, and it's part of a package of other left turn phasing signals. There was a question in regards to what can be done in terms of street racing. So for that, if you have specific information on regular street racing location and times within a 2-hour period, you can report this information directly to the Valley Traffic Division Signal Enforcement Team. And I'm going to drop that link in the email right now. I just put it in there. And they'll be able to coordinate their team to address the street racing. The next question was about how this project area was selected. It was, you know, their project areas, that where they live is a little bit outside of this project area. So yeah, maybe I'll just pose the question as, how was this project area selected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a couple factors that led us to prioritize this project on the LADOT side. And I know there's some factors for Council District 7 as well. But you know, the crash history here and particularly the recent collisions really made it apparent that it was in need of some design consideration and some design changes to create a safer street. It is not the only location in Lakeview Terrace. I know that there have been some major collisions, particularly just west of Osborne Street and in the freeway area there, freeway interchange. But this location also has been on the list for resurfacing over last year and this year and the upcoming year. So the street condition is poor right now, and the resurfacing gives us an opportunity to come in and install new design once that happens. So those two combinations, as well as definitely, I think the fact that it's really a high usage area for horses, for people riding horseback, and for accessing all of the destinations around it, you know, definitely raises the need for those safety improvements so that people can get around more safely. And Council Member Rodriguez's motion, I think, really kicked off this process because there is that long-term plan to create a separated, high quality bridle path. And in the meantime, we can make these improvements at the street level and create a safer street for everyone.
Great. There was a question that somebody had about the corner of Christie and Foothill Boulevard has a pole and pedestrian warning and push button. And this person felt that it was more unsafe when a driver needs to make a left or right turn. The view of cars approaching from the left is blocked by the new quote unquote safety installation. And they're asking if we're aware of that.
So for the Hawk that's going to be built, that's going to have new poles and new hardware, and we'll double check with the designers, but I'm fairly certain that they checked the visibility triangles and they will ensure that the new hardware will not have that effect. We appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Great. There was a question in regards to streetlights. Streetlights are only on the north side of the street, and the south side of the street appears dark. Will there be lights for the south side? So, you know, on one side there was a comment about increasing lighting on the south side, but then there was a follow-up comment saying that lighting can be more intrusive.
I can address a couple of those questions. Currently, there's not a lot of infrastructure on the side. So there are two different kinds of streetlights. There's the typical metal or concrete poles you see that are run by the Bureau of Street Lighting. Then you'll also see these wood poles, like on the screen, you can see right here on the picture, there's a DOT wood pole. Those can have a Cobra head light added to those. So the problem is there's not a lot of infrastructure on the freeway side of the road. And so that has been an issue. Fortunately, by increasing the LED lights on the other side, the pool of light actually covers the entire road. So we've been increasing the lights all throughout on both sides, wherever they are. But yeah, we don't, right now, I don't anticipate that there will be, DWP will be putting new lines in there or new infrastructure. And then if the light is bothering you, we can just give a call into our office. We can actually have either DWP, go out and put up shields that will shield your house from the light, but it still allows the light to light up the street. So you can always reach out to our office and we can help address that.
There was interest in seeing if we could add a stoplight or traffic light on Esco and Foothill Boulevard.
We'll have to get back to you on that. It may be something that had been requested in the past. We have many requests and unfortunately I haven't memorized all of them. So I'll have to get back and I'll get back to you to tell you where that one is at. If we've studied it already before or if it's in the process of being studied, we'll get back to you.
That's the light by All Nations Church. So
oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a little different scenario.
That is a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, yes, that was another question that came up about a stoplight at All Nations Church and seeing where that is in the timeline process. And if anyone has knowledge about that, apparently they're waiting for sign off from DOT before it goes to BOE. And if anyone from the project team is aware of the timeline for that project.
Yeah, well, I can let you know. So the church itself was required to put in that signal as part of their CUP when they first, built the church in the community. And what's happening is they had anticipated a certain amount for the signal, but hadn't, figured out the cost to attach to the next light. So signals are usually connected via trenching. So I think that's been the primary issue with that light.
Okay. There was a number of questions related to the being able to if the narrowness of the lanes or of the lane the horse/mobility lane on the right side, if there would be room for horse trailers to go through that. There's a lot of concerns about the movement of horse trailers.
Yeah, I'm glad that question came up because I definitely want to be very clear, that we are considering all of those uses in the design width of the lanes. And I want to make sure that, we communicate that is still a safe width. And it is, just enough to kind of visually narrow the roadway and encourage safer speeds, but it should not be an issue for, we're certainly designing to bus widths. It should not be an issue for horse trailers and trucks.
Okay, great. So there was concerns about the bollards recently during a recent wildfire. There was some, people had difficulty getting out of the wildfire zone. So there's questions about the removability of bollards or about cars going through in case there's a future wildfire.
So this, I think they're addressing a different section of Foothill that had some bollards that were put in, but that was actually, the issue there was a lane reduction. So this is not affecting at all the travel lanes. So this would only be affecting essentially the parking lane. So it wouldn't reduce any ability to evacuate over what there currently is in this section. So there is no lane reduction at all as far as travel lanes where you would drive.
Right.
If that makes
And
sense.
not to say that that other section, we believe that we've resolved those issues on the other section as well. But
Right.
here, as Eve said, it's not, that shoulder space is not going to be used as a lane for evacuation. It's not wide enough for that. So we're trying to provide a little bit of this sort of physical separation. That's not a wall. It's just, these are plastic, but they are bolted in and they provide some sense of separation beyond just a stripe on the ground that we think will provide a lot of benefit.
Yeah.
Great. So I think this question was kind of answered in the Q&A, but so there was a question about what sort of studies have we done to research how narrower lane, like the relation between narrower lanes and safety and how that reduces speeds. So I was wondering if one of you could speak about that.
It's pretty well accepted at this point in time that 10 feet is more than acceptable and adequate on any non-freeway road, basically. In the old days, there was this thought that on a street, if you provide a wider lane, it's going to be somehow necessary if the street is, bigger than a local street or something. I mean, honestly, it's perplexing why this ever became a thing, but it was a thing. And it became almost a self-fulfilling prophecy where the wider lane would then increase the speed, and then the increased speed would then sort of demand that engineers would think, well, then I have to widen the lanes even more. And it just became almost like a never-ending pursuit of width. So we've learned over the years that it just doesn't do much to have a lane wider than 10 feet, especially given the fact that 10 feet can accommodate virtually any sized vehicle, any normal sized vehicle, including a trailer, including a truck. You're as a driver, you may not even notice this change, although it may slow you down in a way that you may not even realize. It's not going to be something so dramatic where you're going to say, oh my God, this lane is so narrow now. It's not. It's going to be relatively modest of a change in terms of the driver experience.
I also want to, sorry, Eve, thanks for that, Tim. I just wanted to highlight a question. I'm seeing a little discussion in the chat box about why speed matters. I think it's intuitive. I think people, we all understand that it doesn't feel good to be living on the street, that it's a raceway, but it also saves lives. The faster vehicles are going, the less likely a pedestrian or someone on horseback or someone on bicycle, a more vulnerable road user, is to survive a crash. So someone in the chat box highlighted the fact that reducing vehicle speed by just several miles per hour, 10 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour can really improve safety and increase people's likelihood to survive a collision when it does happen. So I think that's important to clarify.
And I wanted to mention too, I don't think we've covered this yet, about, so speed limits are set based on there's actually a state law called a speed trap law that you cannot set a speed at less than what 85% of the people are already driving. So it's sort of a catch-22 that as people speed up more and more, that the speed limits have to go with them. And part of the issue is that with enforcement, for a traffic officer to write a ticket, they usually use either a radar or a laser gun to identify the speed that the driver is going. So for them to be able to do that, the street has to have a current survey, a speed survey. The officer has to be trained, and the radar gun itself has to be calibrated. Or else they get thrown out in court. So what happens is the speed surveys have to be done I believe it's every 7 to 10 years. And so what happens is you can't just arbitrarily say, you know, we're going to set it at 40 miles an hour currently. So the councilwoman has been working with Assembly Member Friedman to try to get local control over that in equestrian areas. But again, it is, you know, it's something that we don't necessarily control at a city level currently. So we're working together with the state to try to see if there's a way to have some local control over.
Someone commented that you can reduce it, and you can reduce it, but very little. So just a quick tutorial on this beyond, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but if the speed, let's say that you measure the speed of 85% of drivers and that 85th percentile is 42, for example, you can narrow it, you can reduce it, you can round down to 40, and you can take an additional 5-mile reduction. You can set the speed limit at 35. You cannot lower it below that, right? If you measured it to be 43, you're now rounding down artificially, right? Because when you round 43, you're supposed to go to 45. If you decide to go to 40, that's it. You cannot go to 35. So 1 mile per hour can make the difference between setting the speed limit at 40 or 35, or in this case, 50. Most likely the 85th percentile here was at least 55 or 56 or 57, and they were able to reduce it to 55 and then down to 50, and that was it. So and this is an unfortunate situation where we have to set it based on the way people drive. And we're hoping that with these changes, we have at least somewhat of an impact on those speeds. And with legislation changes, we hope that we would have additional flexibility to lower it beyond that.
Great. So there's a lot of questions about bridle paths, and I noticed, Eve, in the chat box, you were kind of responding to that. Could you talk a little bit more about the bridle path project?
Yes, certainly. So the bridle path is something that as you know, there's small sections of bridle path kind of throughout the community, like you can see on the photo on the screen to the left. That's an existing bridle path. Traditionally, they've been built or installed when there's some sort of development going on. So for instance, when All Nations Church built, they installed a bridle path out front. The Delphi Academy also installed one out front, but it's been a very patchy approach. So our goal is to put in an entire contiguous bridle path, similar to what you'll see over in Shadow Hills, for instance. It is, you know, a very daunting project, and we're in the process of working on it. Again, as I mentioned, our first section that we are working on is from Osborne to Orcas. So part of that has an existing bridle path that has quite a bit of damage. The fencing's been broken during car collisions, it's rutted. And so we are, you know, looking to repair that, and then also to extend it, you know, in front of the rec center and over to Orcas. So we're in the process of working on that right now. And then eventually we'll keep moving down. It's a pretty long stretch, as you guys know. It's probably close to 4 miles altogether. So we'll be going section by section, and obviously you have to identify funding, and you know, it's a pretty complex project. But that's our goal, is to eventually have horses completely off of the street again and on a dedicated bridle path with different, you know, crossings that are safe for them to cross at to get over to the trails at Hanson Dam.
Great.
Yeah, and I see also that Gabrielle is asking about the 210 freeway. Unfortunately, that I think that was an agreement with Caltrans. We don't have a lot of pull with state agencies, so I would recommend reaching out to your assembly member in regards to that.
Great. So there was some questions related to the lane, you know, the new lane that would go on the right side, about it being paved versus it having DG so that it's safer for horses. And perhaps, Tim, I think you kind of answered it in the chat box, but perhaps you could kind of go through that again a little bit.
Sure. And I think we understand that DG is maybe an ideal surface for horses, but just so everyone understands, this is kind of a flexible space that's meant for all what we would call vulnerable users, or people that are not driving. And as such, we have to make it, you know, in such a way that it accommodates those users. So also putting DG over the asphalt would be not really possible because then it would just end up everywhere. We would have to remove the asphalt. So there would be a lot of things that would have to be done. And then that would alienate the people that are not on a horse. We don't want to do that either. I think knowing that the long-term goal is to provide that separate bridle path, this is really not meant to be the ideal solution or the end solution, but it's meant to be an interim solution that will be better than what's currently out there. We think significantly better. So we understand where that DG might be best for horses, but we're trying to balance the needs of all the users of the road here, I think.
Great. There was another question about, and I saw you kind of answered this as well, Tim, in the chat box, but there was another question about or any, what kind of research we did in terms of equestrian traffic experts and were they consulted in this project?
So in the design of equestrian facilities like a bridle path or a trail, we are by no means the experts, and we would consult with definitely third parties and research, and if we ever really went down that as an agency, DOT is not really geared up for that. That would probably end up being collaborative with Department of Public Works, and we would, I'm sure, at that point bring in the experts. I have done just a little bit of reading on what's out there in terms of how best to design equestrian trails. But again, I just want to back up to my previous comment. This is not meant to be an equestrian path. This is just meant to provide more space, which I don't think at this point we haven't heard anyone say more space is worse. It will be hopefully better, maybe not the ideal solution for equestrians, but better. And that's what we're trying to do in this case. So we're not really trying to design an equestrian path here. We're trying to design a space that can be used by equestrians until such time as a bridle path can be built. And someone mentioned, I think, that changing the surface, it would be very challenging. We can certainly look into this, but it would be very challenging to change the surface of the road in the shoulder area in such a way that would be maintainable and accommodating all the users. So something we can explore, but I just want to set realistic expectations for that.
There was a question about installing speed cameras. I was wondering if somebody could speak about the status of speed cameras.
That's another thing that's going through the legislative process. I think there is a desire, I don't know who sponsored the bill. I think that's different than the Friedman bill, but it's a bill to allow local jurisdictions within California to use speed cameras because it's currently not allowed in California. You may see them you may have seen them in other states. We believe that it would be a very powerful tool, and it would address a lot of the concerns with enforcement and with the lack of enforcement, frankly. So, but at this time, we are not allowed to use them. So if that bill advances, that things could change in the near future, in fact.
Great. There was another question of, has our team considered speed humps?
That's a great question, actually. In traditional times, it would never have been considered on a street like this. We are starting to experiment a little bit with using what we call speed tables on higher speed, bigger roadways. We have not yet gone beyond 35-mile-per-hour speed limit roadways. We want to ensure that they could be done in a safe and effective manner, and we're still in that sort of pilot phase. But around town, you may notice, not so much in the valley yet, but in the basin, we've done a few installations on 35-mile-per-hour streets, and things seem promising. So that's something we hope to explore more and maybe consider for roadways like these in the future, but we're still in that sort of experimental phase of that.
Yeah, could you just kind of explain what a speed table is?
It's basically a speed hump. It's just a flatter version of a speed hump that can be used on a street that's a little bit faster than your typical 25-mile-per-hour local street. It looks more or less the same. It's just flatter and longer.
Great. And then lastly, there was a question if the bike community was on this call expressing their interest in their historically equestrian community. Which just looking at who's attending and the questions so far, it doesn't seem like there is. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up in terms of questions. I've been kind of trying to monitor the Q&A as I've been asking these questions, and Let me check if there's any other questions.
And oh, I was just gonna say, you know, we can still accept questions by email through the project website and through the Council District 7 office. So I want to welcome anyone to follow up. It sounds like you know, a lot of folks here this evening are familiar with the CD7 team. And I really appreciate all of the answers from Eve and from Dominique in jumping in to answer those questions. Tim, were you going to add something?
I just answered in the chat. I mean, basically the tables are still experimental on streets that we're trying them on, which are 35 miles per hour. We haven't yet gotten to the point where we're ready to put them on a street of this speed yet. But that may change in the future.
Yeah, and you know, the extent to which there are horse trailers, that would maybe be a consideration that would be need to be considered if we were to proceed with design on that type of improvement or feature. And so since we're after 7, I think we'll wrap it up at that. Thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate the robust discussion, for all of the questions. And again, I want to thank Eve and Dominique for your input tonight and your partnership in this project, and of course to the council member for her support. And if anything else from the CD7 team?
No, I think that's it for us for now. We'll keep you all posted, of course, on developments as things continue to move forward. And I would also mention we have a series of community visioning workshops coming up. So there's one for each area. So the one for our geographical area, which includes Sunland Tahunga, Shadow Hills, Lakeview Terrace, and Latuna, is on May 27th at 6 p.m. So it will be a broader version of this where we're going to be talking about all sorts of things from infrastructure to public safety, and asking for input on it. So I will definitely share that out with you all as well. And if you are not currently on my email list, feel free to shoot me an email. I send out, all kinds of updates periodically. So we definitely will follow up with everybody whose email we have from tonight. And then I'm happy to include you on future mailings. Okay. Thank you so much.